evening and welcome to Perspectives Daily. I'm Noel Ocol. We continue today with our highlight coverage of the Synod of Bishops in Rome. But first, some developing news from El Salvador. Good evening. I'm Noel Ocol, and you're watching Perspectives Daily. Up next. Good evening. I'm Noel Ocol. Today, on a very special edition of Perspectives Daily, I have Carl Hettu, the National Director for Canada for CNEWA, here to talk to us today about the current situation of the Christians in the Middle East, now that ISIS has been neutralized in Mosul, and to give us an understanding of what's happening in that part of the world. Thank you, Carl, so much for joining us today. We have a lot to cover in today's show, so let's jump right in. But remember, send us a tweet or a Facebook message. Heck, you can even connect with us on Instagram. We'd love to hear what you think the biggest Catholic stories are. So here we go, folks. Salt and Light's top 10 Catholic news stories for 2017. Now, you can imagine that it's not every day that the crew of the International Space Station gets a call from Earth, and certainly not from a guy like the Pope. But that's exactly what happened on October 26th when the Pope himself made a historic call to the crew that was orbiting Earth 400 kilometers directly above us. This is our pick for the number 10 story of 2017, and here are highlights of that historic conversation that was all over the world press. Good evening, I'm Noel Ocol. The Vatican released early this week the agenda for the Pope's much-anticipated apostolic visit to Myanmar and Bangladesh, which will take place at the end of November this year. Good evening and welcome to Vatican Connections. I'm your host, Noel Ocol. And we're back for another week of the latest behind-the-scenes stories directly from the Vatican. And since our last episode, there's been a lot of interesting things that have happened in Rome, so let's jump right into it. Here are just some of the stories that we bring you on tonight's show. And I have all those stories and more coming up next on Vatican Connection, so be sure to stay tuned. Thank you so much, Peter, for taking a moment to join us today.
Oh, no, it's great.
I very much appreciate it.
Good.
If we look back at your extraordinary career, you've personally covered 2 papal visits to Canada, the death of Pope John Paul II, the historic retirement of 1 pope, the election of 3 popes, and the Truth and Reconciliation Report. What would you say, Peter, was the most emotional Catholic event that you've covered? Hi, I'm Noel Ocol from Salt and Light Television, here at the very site of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is a very sacred place, the place where Jesus had died, was buried, and rose again. For the next several months, we Canadians are celebrating 150 years of Canadian Confederation, and we can't talk about the contribution of the Catholic Church to Canada over the past 150 years without looking at some of the major educational contributions given to us by the Congregation of St. Basil's, also known as the Basilian Fathers. And who better to shed some light on the history of the Basilian mission in Canada than my friend Father James Carruthers, who not only is a Basilian Father himself, but also the Director of Ongoing Formation for the congregation, a scholar, a teacher, and a gentleman. If you are a movie junkie like me, you've probably noticed that most movie reviews are basically plot summaries with zero or very little editorial perspectives based on any moral standards. Now, it's not very often that you come across a book that gives out Christian perspectives on blockbuster films in a way that ties together the connection between faith and film, as this book does. A Catholic Goes to the Movies, by Brazilian father and theologian, a movie critic, Father Daniel Callum. And on today's Catholic Focus, Father Callum joins us not only to talk about his book, but also to talk about some of the underlying Christian themes that can be found in some of the more popular films of the day. So be sure to stay tuned. That is all that we have time for today. I'm Noel Ocol. Thank you for watching Catholic Focus. I'm Noel Ocol for Salt and Light Television here in Jerusalem. That's our show for the week. We'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on today's stories. So why not drop us a line on the Salt and Light Facebook page or on our Twitter handle listed below. I'm Noel Ocol. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week. That is all that we have time for this week. I'm Noel Ocol. Join us again on Monday when we bring you more news and stories from the perspectives of a Catholic lens. And we'll see you next week. And finally now, from all of us here at Salt Light, we wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us.